Hello Airsoft friends, and welcome to this video today where we are hopefully going to end this video with our Action Army AAC T10 finally at limits and ready to play with, or close enough to ready to play with, because at the minute it's over FPS. We got it and it was incredibly under FPS because of where it was manufactured. It had to be less than 1 joule, and now it's over about 515 FPS. Now there are a couple of tricks you can do to try and get the FPS down. One of them is just use the rifle a lot, because when you use the rifle, the spring gets used and then it loses some of its tension and then the FPS drops. But we can't play at the moment, and that's a bit of a shame. So what I did was an alternative option: leave it cocked for a period of time, and because you're leaving it cocked, you're leaving the spring under tension, and then that should kind of like wear the spring in. I did that, and I only lost about 3 FPS, and that was leaving it for about 4 days, and I wouldn't have expected it to have lost much more FPS after that. So I guess the good thing is that the spring that I got is it should hopefully be performant, which is nice to see. Good stuff. So the annoying thing though is that I do need to do something in order to bring the FPS down. But, you know, what is that something you're going to do, Chris? So what are you going to do? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these snippy things, and I'm just going to cut the bastard down. We're going to get the spring out, we're going to take some coils off it, we're going to chrono it, and hopefully everything will be okay. So, first step is to know where we're at and just double check how much FPS over we are, so that we can double check. Now at this point it's important to note that UK sight limits for bolt action sniper rifles is 500 FPS on 0.2 gram BBs. Now if your airsoft sight chronos only on 0.2 gram BBs, then you can get as close to 500 FPS on 0.2s as you like. If your sight chronos or asks you to chrono on the weight that you're going to be playing with, so for example, I'm going to be playing with 0.46s, because of dual creep, that means that I need my 0.2 gram FPS to probably be closer to the 460 mark, because then the dual creep using the heavyweight BBs, because it's getting more energy inserted into it, because it moves slower, it will actually end up being at that dual limit. So I'm going to kind of like demonstrate that in this video. If you're familiar with dual creep, then you know exactly what that is. If you're not familiar with dual creep, it's kind of like an important thing, depending, like I said, on what site you go to. So I've got 0.2 gram BBs in this magazine, I've got 0.4 gram BBs in this magazine. All I'm going to do is, this is the M150 spring, unedited. I'm going to put a 0.2 gram BB in there, just like so. Oh yeah, you do want to do it with the amount of hop that you're going to be using in the game as well. There's no point doing it non-hopped. I'm just going to put my hop on about halfway. So this is going to be a slight guesstimation, really. I just haven't been out to test it with the hop on yet. So I'm going to do it just about there, like so. Turn it on, 0.2 gram BBs, and where's the trigger? There it is. 530 FPS or 2.6 joules. So I got a fair amount of headroom there, which I need to kind of like come down on in order to make sure that this is going to be sight legal. So 2.6 joules, 530 FPS. I'm now going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to cock it. The only thing I'm doing is putting a 0.46 gram BB in there. Loves BBs, which I do enjoy using. And I'm going to change the weight. So on here it now says 0.46 grams. And it came in at 348 FPS, and the joules was 2.59. So this is 0.3 joules more powerful using the 0.46 gram BB than using the 0.2 gram BB. So what that means is if my sight chronoed only on 0.2 gram BBs, I'd only need to bring the FPS down by about 30. But because I play at sights that chrono both on the weight I'm using, which is the right way to do it, and also 0.2 gram BBs, I actually need to bring the FPS down by about 60 or 70 when using 0.2 gram BBs in order to make it, you know, like sight legal under those requirements. So with those figures being set, it is time for us to take the cylinder out, get to the spring, and then chop a few coils. And there we have our spring. Now there's no real science to this. It's much more art, I'd say, than science in determining how many coils to cut off. But remember that you can always cut them off, but you can't add them on unless you buy a new spring, and I don't really want to do that. So we're going to go slow and steady, rebuild this. It's a bit of annoyance, really, to be fair, because you have to go slow and steady, cut some off, retest it, and then hopefully you're going to kind of get to the point where everything will be okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my snips, and I'm going to come in here, and first of all, I think I'm going to cut off. So you've got, I like to kind of see the overlap point here, as being one full coil. So I'm going to actually cut that first one off, and I'm going to do 2 coils actually here. So you can see where that line mark is there. That's where that first coil begins. So I would class the bit just underneath that coil number 1, and then this one here is coil number 2. So I'm going to cut off 2.5 coils. No, I'm just going to cut off. Yeah, I'm going to cut off 2.5 coils first of all. So I'm going to cut this one, that one, that one. I'm going to come onto this side and cut it off here. So I'm going to bring my snips in. It's a bit of a tricky angle, but we'll see what we can do. And you want to be careful with your eyes on this, because when you cut it, it could like ping off and go all over the place. So make sure you are wearing eye protection, or just look away and hold this down somewhere, so then you're safe. There we go. That is snipped. So here is the newly cut spring, and here is the part of the spring which we chopped off. So yeah, exactly 2.5 coils we have removed from, well, not exactly 2.5 coils. It's slightly less than 2.5 coils. So it's probably like 2 and, I don't know, it's just slightly less than 2.5 coils. With that being done, it's now time to put it back into the rifle. And the way I like to do it is, because this end's kind of like a bit at an angle now, I always put the flat end onto the spring guide, because I think it's important always to have a flat edge on there, and then the bendy end are kind of like put into the piston. We're going to rebuild it now, put it back inside, test it, and see if we need to take more off the coil. But it's also important to note that when we do finish this off, we do want to flatten this down a little bit too. So I'm going to use my Dremel to do that, to make sure there's a nice flat surface touching on the inside of this, so my cylinder doesn't get damaged. And yeah, it's just an important extra note of housekeeping to make sure everything works well for a long time. So yeah, this cylinder is pretty naff, to be fair. It's really hard to get the threads like lined up properly in it. And now we are good to test. So we'll do 0.2 gram BBs again. Okay, that one went away. And, 506 FPS. Pretty spot on, to be fair. The limit on joules in the UK is 2.33. At the minute, we're at 2.34, so that's almost spot on. So that shows us for sure that we need to cut more coils off this spring before we get site legal. There's no point testing it on the 0.46 gram BBs, because the power is only going to be higher than that. So we know at this point that we need to make it less powerful. But before we do that, I'm going to put some 4.6s in, and I'm going to rebuild the rifle and do some test shots just to make sure the hop is set at an adequate level. Because the more hop that you put on, the less coils I'm going to have to cut off, because hop will reduce the power of the BB anyway. So yeah, it is a good shout to make sure your hop is at the same level as you would play it. I just kind of eyeballed it and put it halfway on, but I may need to put it on more than that because of the heavyweight BBs that I'm using. So I'm going to pop and do that quickly, and I'll be back with my hop level set at the right level. I am back, and I did adjust my hop a little bit. I had to put it on more because, yeah, my shots just weren't going anywhere near where I wanted them to go. So I have adjusted my hop. The hop is now on. Let me take my 0.2 gram BBs and re-chrono this bad boy, and hopefully see if that's any better. So, magazine is in. We are cocked and ready to go. Chrono is on. First BB going through chrono now. And that came up as 2.03 joules, or also 467 FPS, which is pretty much perfect, I think. So, recock, that goes there. And then, shot, 453, 1.9 joules. That is okay. Again, that is still pretty much where I wanted it to be on 0.2 gram BB. So, hooray. One final test now. Cocked, ready to go, and 456, 1.94 joules. So yeah, fairly consistent in there. I would ideally like it to be better, but I imagine over time that spring will kind of like normalize out, and then our FPS standing will be kind of like okay. So with that being done with 0.2 gram BBs, let's now put the 0.46 gram BB magazine in there and see what we're getting with it. 0.46 gram BBs, and that came up as 1.65 joules, a little bit less than that. Okay, let's go again. 290 FPS, 1.8 joules. That seems a little bit more closer. 298, 1.9 joules. Again, that was quite close to that one there. And then finally, 296.5, 1.88. That's interesting there, though, because I've actually lost joulage from going up the BB weight instead of gaining jewelage, where usually I was always gaining jewelage. I wonder what's happened there. I mean, 1.9 joules, which is what these are kind of like averaging around, 1.9 joules, that's a good spot to be, because that means I'm consistently under. So if I was to get any fluctuations in spring performance due to temperature and whatnot, then I'm still going to be under the FPS limit. So the ideal limits will be, what, 2.33 joules. So I've got, what, 0.4 joules of playroom. So that's not terrible. I mean, I would like to have less than that. I would like to be closer. But at this point in time, I'm kind of happy with that, because at least it's now site legal and playable. So what does this mean overall? Well, this means that, unfortunately, at the start, I should have adjusted my hop all the way properly before cutting my spring down. My FPS did drop from where it was to where it is, putting my hop on. So I should have done that at the start. I knew I should have done, but I was just kind of going quick, and I didn't think properly. I was silly. I should have done that. So when you're doing this, make sure your hop is properly adjusted. So it is a little bit lower than I would like it to be. So I have gone online and I found an M145 spring. So it's slightly less than the M150, and potentially will make this spot on the limit, because I always want my guns to be as spot on the limit as possible, so I can make use of all of that power. Of course, FPS isn't everything, because you can have a really well performing gun and not have it be as high FPS, but I'm the kind of person who does like to have the power and then make it perform well as well, and then it's the best of both worlds. So that's what we're going to be doing. I've got another spring coming. We're going to pop that in as well and see if we can get it close to the limits, but for now, at least the rifle is now site legal. So I can take this to an airsoft site and play with it, which is exactly what we want to have it to be. Because now we've got a date where we can play. We can play airsoft on March 29th. Hooray. So that's really good to see. And yeah, that's it for this video. So thank you all very much for watching. Huge shout out to all of my wonderful Patreons as well. Thank you very much for supporting the channel, Patreoning away as you do month on month. I really do appreciate it. And also a big shout out to the StayFreshShoe Airsoft community Discord. If you're not a part of the Discord community yet, what are you doing? Click the link in the description below, join the Discord, become a member, and enjoy being a member, because there's lots of cool people on there. Hooray. And the sun is in my eyes now. Oh my god. And as for that, that's it for this video. So thank you for watching. Remember to call your hits, and I'll see you in the next one.